Hello, hi, welcome again, everyone. This is Dharmaraj from IWT as a part of the EIV or every Indian volunteering ecosystem. So good to see so many of you who've joined us today in this discussion with Jithin from Make a Difference. We're really excited about how much we can learn through the course of this conversation. Um, uh, just a quick intro about Jithin and about MAD. I'm sure there's a lot that you can read up on him through their website or through his LinkedIn profile as well. But one of the things that stood out for me was how deeply passionate, not just he is about the cause, obviously, but yesterday we were talking about the organization, and it was so nice to see him speak so passionately. But not just because he's the CEO, but also, it took me back to 8 years ago when I first met a MAD volunteer who was a college student somewhere in Bombay. And she spoke with the same intensity and passion that Jithin spoke yesterday, right? So I'm pretty sure there's something magical that they're doing at MAT, where the CEO and the volunteer have the same amount of drive, same amount of passion towards what they're doing, and to make a difference. uh, awesome. So we'll have Jithin join us and speak in a minute. But before we do that, I'm just running the first poll to help us set more context before the conversation. Uh, if you can see the poll, please give me a thumbs up in the chat. Superb. Good to see responses coming in. Hmm. We'll take another 30 seconds for all of you to respond. I think over 22 of you have already responded. It'll be nice to hear from everyone on the poll. Another 10 seconds in case you haven't responded. Yeah, just a reminder that all the questions need to be answered for your responses to be registered. I think almost 33 of you have replied out of 37. Yeah, last 10 seconds in case anybody's left or anybody's not replied to or responded to all the questions. Cool. So we'll end the poll. The 4 people who could not respond, I hope you're either eating breakfast or will be joining us soon for the next poll. I'm ending the poll and sharing the response with everyone for you to view. Please give me a thumbs up if you can see the overall response on your screen. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Interesting to see that almost 52% of you have said that managing volunteers uh, is tough, is probably one of the biggest challenges. Superb. This is useful. Thank you so much, everyone. We will also be downloading responses to the poll so that we can also share it after the session for us to get more context and learning from. Yeah, over to you, Jithin, if you want to take it from
there. Hey, hi, can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. Gives me a lot of hope to see more than 40 people attending a session on volunteering. I've been recently thinking about why do I care about volunteering so much, and why do I care about people who care about volunteering so much. And I think one big part of it is that people who believe in volunteering tend to also believe in human beings. They tend to believe that human beings have a role to play in solving what are the problems that we are experiencing as a collective or community at this point of time. And it's kind of interesting because now more than ever, if you're, not everybody who believes in social change really believes in people. Many people actually believe that people are the problem. And probably what we need is less number of people and people not causing more harm. And I completely understand that it makes a lot of sense, but I still am in that part of the demography that genuinely believes that the problems that we are experiencing as a collective at this point of time, unless everybody volunteers, we will not be able to solve it. And hopefully in today's presentation, we can discuss that a little bit. How do we go about doing that in MAD? And more than interactive, I don't know how interactive I have really made it, to be honest. My request is, if you have any questions, just stop me in the middle of the presentation itself, and don't put it on chat because I'm very bad at multitasking. Just stop, Jithin, and unmute yourself and start talking, and we can always have a conversation or discussion about any of this. There are two parts of the presentation which I will be pausing for conversations for sure, but if there's any other places where that is interested, that'll be great. And I'm also really happy to see so many familiar faces, people who I want to talk to. Like I see people from Karthi from Everest, Team Everest. I've been hearing so much amazing things about Team Everest that Matt has so much to learn from your organization. And there's Jithin here, who's been like a long-term supporter of ours. Like feeling really humbled and grateful for so many people turning up today. And I hope this will be useful for you guys. And that's really the intention. So if there's any questions, anyway, this can be more useful. Please, let's make it useful together. That's probably the first thing. And second is like a big thank you for Indian Welfare Trust also. I have wanted to share and wanted to openly talk about what we are doing and make a difference and things like that. Just haven't gotten the time because life has been a little on the hectic side. But just the effort of bringing so many people together and giving us a platform to share and acknowledging that what we have is something worthy of share. That also, like, it means a lot to us, and there's a lot of effort to kind of bring 44 such interesting, relevant people into a room. And thank you so much for that. And last, I guess, I think one more thank you I have to give is to Blue Ribbon Movement. When I was making the whole presentation in the morning, I realized that I was just doing it in a bland white background presentation, and by the end of it I felt like I was not doing justice. It almost came across as I'm not putting in enough effort, even though my heart and soul is on this PPT, but it did not look that good. So I actually copied one of the presentations that Blue Ribbon Movement actually had done. I've used their template, and there's an apology because they have used the template so much more beautifully. I have just I feel like it's a poor adaptation of their template. So one, thank you, Blue Ribbon Movement, for sharing the template and letting me use it without fully asking for permission. But it's a volunteering space, so I think it should be all right. But also apologies for not doing the best job with it. Hopefully I can spend some time after that. I really got into it once I started doing it. Hopefully I'll get some time to redo it sometime and present it some other day. But without further ado, let's start. As I said, if you have anything, please feel free to unmute and share. Would really want this to be useful for everybody. So yeah, MAD volunteering, like how do we do it and what is it that we focus on? To first really understand why we need volunteers, or why volunteering is at the core of the work we do, is because of the specific type of work we do, which is we work with children in need of care and protection. These are children who are not safe in their own families and hence are in a childcare institution where they are taken care of by people who are not their family. And one of the most important things for a child to grow up in when they grow up is 1:1 care, 1:1 support, 1:1 attention. And that the current childcare institution is not able to provide, because the child, for every 40 children, there is normally 1 or 2 caregivers, and that's not enough. And a big part of volunteering is how do we ensure that at least once or twice a week, child gets one-on-one dedicated attention. The other big part of it was that the children that we are working with, it's not a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year program that if they go through, they will be able to break out of the cycle of poverty that they're stuck in. The latest social mobility index spoke about children that we work with, which is the bottom 10 percentile of the income demography in India. It takes them 7 generations to get to mean income, which is around 20,000 rupees. 7 generations around 210, 220 years. And that's too long. In MAD, we have figured out how to do this in 18 years. In 18 years, children that we work with, 90% of them will hit mean income. And that's that 18-year-long intervention, doing it in a paid model. We have not figured out how to do that. It becomes very costly. And a volunteering model really helps to build those kind of long-term relationships. The high cost per child model today, children who are from the kind of backgrounds do require, it's not just enough to invest in their education or things like that. You also need to pay for their college fees. You need to pay for their education, stipends, to pay for their living expenses. When they have a crisis in their life, you need to support them. So there's a lot of cost actually, and most corporates are not willing to pay that kind of money. And we have been able to get volunteers. Volunteers is kind of critical for us because volunteers are not only able to support children through their hours, but they are also able to raise funds. Like Team Everest is setting standards across the country on how much volunteers can actually raise funds. That is directly for beneficiary cost, which kind of makes the overall program a lot more feasible. And last but not the least, there are 350,000 children in childcare institutions in the country right now. And if you're really trying to solve the problem in its full scale, based on our best understanding over the last 15 years, nothing other than a volunteer-based model can work. An employee-based model cannot work. That's our understanding. So there are some models, some causes where a volunteer-based model is better, and that's where you should use volunteers to a great extent. And last but not the least, today Make a Difference is working with children in need of care and protection in childcare institutions. But the long-term goal for us is to create a safe space for every child to grow, and children who are not just in childcare institutions, but also children in families. And how can we extend this volunteer-based care back to the family space also, and ensure that we're able to provide family-based care, and children who do not have families provide foster-based care, so that one day we can reduce the number of children who are in childcare institutions. And these models, family-based care and foster care models today, do not exist in a scaled manner in India simply because the employee model is not working for that. But we believe that a volunteer model can actually make it happen, which can reduce the number of children being institutionalized. And so all this is to really say that for MAD, volunteering is at the heart of the impact that we want to create. And that's where all of this, and that's why we have kind of innovated consistently. Keeping this in mind is where the innovation on how to volunteer, like what do we need from volunteers on a day-to-day basis, has really come from. So on that lovely note, what is our understanding of what drives young people? We feel that the number one thing that drives young people is a sense of purpose. There is definitely, and I experienced this as a young person when I started volunteering, but there was definitely a need to figure out, what am I doing all of this for? What's the big goal? Like, what's the purpose of life? Or, there is a sense of the lack of purpose was something that a lot of young people at a very deep level affects them. It may not be something that they might actually talk about. Most volunteers, and I ask them, why do they join volunteering? Man, they don't say that, they wanted to fulfill a sense of, they want to get a sense of purpose in their life. But when I sit with them in a circle for 10, 20, probably half an hour or few hours, it really comes out that, what they're really getting out of Make a Difference is that they have a sense of purpose in their life right now. They believe in something larger than themselves, and being able to work towards that is really what is really enabling them to stay in the organization. And the real belief that they can make a difference. Young people, at least when I was young, we never believed that we could make a difference. It was always, so that being able to make a difference and somebody believing in us did make a big, huge difference. For many young people, be having the ownership of a challenge, of having the ownership to solve something, again, is a huge motivation, because normally, when you're in school or in college, you're not really given that much ownership to solve challenges in many ways. So that's another part of it. So we believe that like a sense of purpose is like a pretty big driver for young people. And the next big driver is that it's that time in their life where they are they're exploring, they're in an exploratory phase, and you really want to explore your horizon and expand your horizon, which means that having new experiences that you cannot otherwise have has a huge impact on for children. Being mentored, there's a need to be mentored, like somebody who's already walked the path before me, being able to help me give some guidance on which is the direction that I should go, because there are so many options and you don't know which is the right option. Everything looks a little scary. So being able to kind of choose that path is important, and a big part of it is being challenged. I feel a lot of people actually get this in the volunteering space, don't fully live this, which is that as a young person, you are looking for challenges. You're looking for tough things to, mountains to conquer and things like that, and that has a huge component to it. And, you want to learn, you want to develop, you want to grow, and you want to be also coached in some way. Coaching in MAD, the way we see it is that some space for you to be able to reflect on what your life has been so far and how you can learn from it and how can you grow from it, and living life a lot more intentionally. These are things that we feel like are really at the core of what drives young people. And finally, the third part, I just realized that I did not, just one, it's 1, 2, 3. The third is be able to find your tribe. You are influenced as a young person to a great extent, not by the adults, but the near adults, people of your peer group who have similar value systems, who care about you also, where you're not a stranger in that group, where you feel safe to be who you are, where you're accepted for who you are. If you make a mistake, people have got your back. You're not living in fear to a great extent, and part of something larger than yourself, working towards a collective. Being part of a collective, really, there is something about youth movements and being part of this large collective that we feel kind of really drives young people. So it's keeping all of this in mind that we built our mobilization framework. So this is what we feel what mobilizes young people to volunteer and make a difference. By this, what we say is that for every activity that we do, we have a look at this and say, okay, fine, are we through this activity creating authentic connections? Are we inspiring them? Are we creating some space for them to feel part of a larger collective? Are we giving them ownership? Are we giving them opportunities to give them ownership through this thing? Are they feeling cared for through this activity at some point of time? Are they empowered to change things which bother them in that activity? Are they growing and developing in the whole process? Are they becoming a better version of themselves? Do they have people to mentor them? Do they have spaces to be coached or to get reflected on, to reflect on what is they're experiencing in their life? And finally, if when they need support, is there somebody to step in and support them? If all of these components we feel is there, every activity may not have all of them, but if all of these activities are there, we feel that an average person will be extremely mobilized to do whatever it takes to solve the problem that your organization has come together for. So this is probably the first place where I would pause. More from the idea of if I would request, if you could just look at this framework, see, obviously most of you would be doing a lot of these, but is there something that you are currently not doing? And is there a reason why you are not doing it? Is there any, so would love to kind of hear your insights, looking at, your own, it's a reflection of your own model, and what do you have to share about it? Do you see any of these aspects that you're not focusing on, and why do you think you're not focusing on? Based on that, probably we might be able to have some interesting conversations. It's open to everybody, whoever feels comfortable sharing, please.
Hi Jithin, this is Samita from iVolunteer. I would like you to explain the third one, which is collectivize. What exactly that means?
Yes. So let me give you an example, which is that we do community fundraising, which is people, volunteers in a city raises the funds that is required to support the beneficiaries of that city itself. Now, through that, you can actually get one volunteer to raise the fund that is required, and it's around 12,000 rupees or 20,000 rupees, whatever they are able to raise. And you can train them to do it, you can enable them, you can empower them. But there is some part of it where you're telling them how you are doing this along with 3,500 other volunteers, and this is how the others are doing, and this is the total amount of funding that all the volunteers in Make a Difference is raised. And that activity of collectivizing, where you're not an individually, but you're part of a larger collective, and there are so many other people doing something just like you, and together look at the impact that you're able to create. Because they might be able to raise probably 12,000, 15,000 rupees by themselves, but they'll see about 3,500 other people like me have been raising it, and together as a collective we raised 1 crore or 2 crores, and that suddenly gives them a lot more inspiration than just the fact that, oh, I raised only 15,000 rupees. Does that, how much of an impact is it really making? So being able to really connect to the impact of the collective and making the collective's impact your own, which is true. Just realizing that the collective's impact is your own is a very important part of our mobilization framework, primarily because we also want the individual in the community or individual in the collective to act in the best interest of the larger collective, because they should be able to not just connect to, okay, fine, what can I do and what is in my best interest, but what is in the community's best interest, the collective's best interest, and how can I act from that space. So collectivizing really enables us to constantly do that. So for us, many times we first ensure the volunteer is connected to the larger collective before they're even connected to their respective city or any of those things. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Jithin, hi, I'm Shishir. I'm
Hi,
based in
Shishir.
Bombay.
Yes, hi.
So just to check now, the mentoring part, are we referring to maybe the feeling among volunteers to say, yes, you have the opportunity to be mentored if the need be, or creating formal mentoring structures within the volunteering setup? Let's say, to give you an example, if we have, let's say, 100 or 500 volunteers for a project, within that, do I break it up into groups of 50 and have volunteer leaders within those, or somebody who could be, let's say, at a senior level, who's available if the need be?
Correct. So in our context, with the way we use mentoring is what the reason we brought in mentoring, and this is actually something fairly new in our framework also, and we are making sense of it ourselves. But the realization was that young people, especially who are in the volunteering space, are already walking the less walked trajectories, paths. They are, on one side, that's great because they have the confidence to do that. It is not the most mainstream thing to do at this point of time, but once they join MAD and they really enjoy volunteering, they're like, okay, fine, I'm really connected to this. But they are actually, there's this fear that sets in about like, but now what happens from now? Like, what should I be doing? Like, is there a future in this for me? What is the trajectory for me in this space, in the volunteering space, in the working with children space? And like, if you're somebody who took science, it's very clear. You join as an engineer, you spend 4 years as an engineering course, and then you join a IT company, then you do your master's. There's a very clear trajectory that is there. But as a young person who's is actually very lost, and that brings in a lot of anxiety. And a mentor really, and this is not just from a career perspective, but just like even in a day-to-day basis, being within the organization in MAD. Like an average volunteer stays in MAD for 2 to 3 years at least. Most fellows and strategists, leadership people in the organization, some 300, 400 people every year, have been for 4 to 5 years average. So your journey inside MAD itself is quite long, and it is helpful to have a mentor to kind of help you understand, okay, fine, you don't need to get stressed about your class not going too well at this point of time. It takes around 6 months before you kind of things kind of ease up. Okay, you are really enjoying this part. Probably there is value in you taking up this kind of a fellowship to be able to progress in your way forward. And this is how you will be able to use the skills that you're building in the organization outside the organization. This is how you'll be able to find a job outside the organization. So it's really people who are capable of having those conversations, whether it's structured or unstructured. When those conversations are not happening, young people are getting lost. Young people are getting stressed out about not knowing which direction to take. And at some point when the parents get angry about the fact that they're spending too much time volunteering and things like that, and that there is no future in it, that they tend to quit in a weak moment and end up focusing on something more traditional. So that's what we mean by mentoring. I don't know if that's not probably the traditional sense of it, but does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Jithin. Thanks so much.
Jithin, Venkat here. Will you also be showing your structure of
Yes.
the volunteer to the coordinators to the so on and so forth? Yeah. Right? Because that explains this mentoring piece much better, right?
Yes, I just realized probably I should have put like a session, what all am I covering slide in the beginning. I'll add it in the next one. Yeah, makes sense. I'll be covering that for sure. Okay, I'm going to push people for just one more time. I would like to hear, when you're looking at your own model at this point of time, if you could just reflect on, is there any one of these components that you don't do? And if you don't do that, like, why don't you do that? I think there's an interesting conversation to be had there, and I want to kind of push people on. I would love to kind of have that conversation if that's possible. If not, is there something that you do which is not in this? That will also be an interesting conversation. So if you could share that, that'll be cool.
Hi, Jithin. This is Abhishek here. I'm from Volunteer Services Organization. Is a part of a university, and it's not like the way you work. It's a very structured way in volunteering only. Here, we have students who are for professional courses, and along with that, they do volunteering. And here, there are few of these which drives them, but the bigger picture is they have a course which they have to manage, and in the time when they get in the weekends or in the evenings of a weekend, they do these volunteering activities. So the trajectory which you were talking about mentoring, so a sort of that happens here as well, that from the volunteer to the coordinator to the main ambassador, we say ambassador, so the person who main person who has grown from the volunteer to the main thing. But we motivate them to go to the social entrepreneurship sector. But as I was mentioning, that their core work is they are in the here when we talk about traditional, here it is traditional plus they are getting an idea of this as well. So that doesn't work, like totally mentoring of that trajectory doesn't work. Yeah, we motivate them that is we show them that there is a lot of work is happening here as well. And like that, if you today you will be showing a structure, so similarly we could also show them that you have, so we didn't know that what kind of exactly a trajectory if you go into this setup, because their main focus is their professional course. Along with that, they are getting a chance or opportunity to help a community or to be involved in the community and to get learn from the community in exchange. Along with this, we have one model where they get the internet on they have everything recorded online, so they get service hours. So, and they get a certificate at the end that we have marked with this many number of hours minimum you should have, then only you can apply for a certificate. Only once in your course you can apply for a certificate. So they get that certificate signed by a vice chancellor, and so that that also drives them to work in our setup. So that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing that. What I was thinking is, if there is nobody, if others are not sharing, One request to DS is, if we can probably make this into, sorry, that's my fun slide. If we can make a poll, or if it is possible at this point of time, I don't know if that's possible in between. Would love to kind of, it'll be good to kind of like reflect back for the whole this thing also about if this could be the poll questions. And if people could just answer, what all do you feel they're doing, well in the organization at this point of time? And that'll be like probably an interesting data for all of us to have. And even for IWT, you can see where is the gap that is there in the sector, and probably that's where probably we can provide more specific inputs going forward. And probably we can even add, based on people's understandings, we can probably add more components to the framework also. Before I move on, the one component that I wanted to kind of focus a little bit in this was the authentic connections part. The authentic, really at the center of our entire volunteering model is our ability to build an authentic relationship between the volunteer and the beneficiary, the child. It's from there that everything else kind of comes out of. So if there is a seed from which everything else, like without that authentic connection, none of the other things really, bring in the real value that that it requires. So once there is a strong connection between the child and the volunteer really cares about the child, and the child really cares about the volunteer, then the volunteer is inspired by the possibility of making a difference in that child's life, but also making a difference in knowing that there are 50,000, a million other children like that in the country, and I can make a difference in all of their, I can make some difference in all of their life. That is where really the inspiration starts flowing, and that's why being part of a collective really matters. That's why having ownership of the larger collective, where okay, I too can do something about it, and this is where the I am. The collective matters. What the collective achieves matters to me, and I'm going to actively contribute towards it. Becomes a part of it. A lot of the care for the collective comes from the fact that unless we are a caring support system for each other, we will never be able to provide that a better world for the children that we are working with. So all of these other components, and even a big part of growth and development really comes from the connection, because service is one way of your own inner growth and your own inner development. And inner development and inner growth is like, it's not the most easiest. And many a times, most, people, like I know for myself, a lot of the growth that I have had in my life, I grew because not for myself. I would be very happy to not grow if it was for myself. I realized that if I don't grow, if I don't overcome this challenge, it will not be good for my family or my children. And that connection really enables that, that growth journey. And that's where really people push themselves and be the better versions of themselves. And that's where only that willingness to be the better versions of themselves with the coaching and the mentoring and the support really is of any use. So I have two people who raised their hands. That's very happy. Anubha Goel, would you like to go next?
Hi, Jithin. Hi, everyone. My name is Anubha, and I'm from Save the Children India. The framework mostly covers it, but there's just one thing that I would like to add, which has been working for us in our volunteering ecosystem, which is sensing workshops, which are basically workshops for young people to bring in their perspective on what their role could be in solving pertinent issues and how we as an organization can support them in solving them. And their insights are sort of added to our volunteering policies or our policies in general, the strategies that we formulate every 3 months or every 4 months. They sort of translate into those, which gives them sort of like a feeling that, what they're saying or what they're being heard, and their perspective is being taken into account. So I think that's really worked for us. Just wanted to add that.
That makes so much sense. And that's where the ownership also, the collective ownership also comes to some extent, because the realization that as young people, we also have something to contribute. It's not that we're just cannon fodder, we're just here to execute, but we are actually here, we are an integral part of an integral stakeholder, and we also have something to contribute to it. And that sense, and treating them with that kind of respect really goes a long way. Absolutely. Tanya?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Jithin. I'm Tanya, and I'm from Red Dot Foundation, Safe City. So with us, I think because we deal with gender-based violence and it's such a sensitive topic, empowering the volunteer to, not only learn to empathize, but also take care of themselves. I think self-care, mental health, and dealing with issues first before they can reach out to somebody else, because they themselves would have may have experienced some kind of abuse or gender-based violence which they've never really maybe shared with anyone. So there's a lot of introspection, there's a lot of self reflection, coaching, growth, and then I'm able to go out and help somebody else and maintain myself. So, look after myself and help others to maintain themselves. So there's a sustainability also. So this model works very well with them because they realize that they are gaining so much, not just from a capability or capacity building perspective, but also from a self-care and sustainability perspective. Thanks.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. That's such a critical part of it, and in our thing, it falls in a little bit in the care domain, but this definitely needs a space of its own. Just to kind of add to that, what we the narrative that we have inside the organization is that your ability to make a difference outside fundamentally depends on how well are you. If you are in a safe, secure, stable space, then the quality of impact, it's not about the number of hours that you put in there, but the quality of impact that you have is fundamentally better. So really nourishing yourself. Are you sleeping on time? Are you sleeping enough? Are you eating well? Are you exercising? Have you done your own inner work yourself? Like all of this is kind of critical, and that's kind of what falls in the self-care space. And you caring for yourself will lead to you being able to be a better support system and not bring in your personal issues into the workspace. So in MAD, we actually separate works, we separate these things. We call it the purpose space and the personal space. And we don't tend to mix these. We say that purpose space is a space where you act as a response to the world that you're living in. And there is no, when you're in the purpose space, you're not really focused on your needs being met. You're focused on who are you working with, ensuring that their needs are being met. But that doesn't mean that your needs don't matter. So you should enter your purpose space. You have your own personal space where your needs are the priority. And unless you get your personal space sorted, entering the purpose space will be a challenge. And hence there is a lot of focus on sorting your own, taking care of yourself in the whole journey. Thank you so much for that. That's how we have kind of made sense of it in our organization. Prasid?
Yeah, thanks, Jithin. It's a really insightful presentation so far. Had a quick question. I wanted to get some thoughts from you on whether this mobilization framework is similar for urban sector as well as the rural sector. By the way, I'm from Deep Benefit, so just have that context.
Awesome. We don't do rural at all. That's Deep Benefit is doing a phenomenal job, and I'm sure you guys have like 5 more other things to add to this framework. But we don't work in rural at all.
Yeah, just one. So if not rural, then at least say Tier 3, Tier 4 cities. If that makes sense.
Like we work in a Guntur, a Gwalior, a Vijayawada, and it works there. So I don't know if that falls under the Tier 3, Tier 4 at all. Yeah, so that's what I would say. Like that's our level of experience that we have at this point of time.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So on that lovely note, I shall move forward. Thanks a lot, everyone, for sharing. One of the common myths that we have in volunteering is that volunteers have other things to do and they're always busy. But the truth is, volunteering done well, volunteering wins all the time. The truth is, like college or studies, it's considered to be one of the primary reasons why people are not volunteering. But like the truth is that college can provide a sense of purpose and expand your horizons and find your tribe, but colleges are doing such a bad job at it, unfortunately, at this point of time, that if volunteering is able to provide these, volunteering will win hands down. Same with social media. Social media is also can, give you a sense of like who's your tribe and connect with them and expand your horizons and stuff like that. Probably not sense of purpose, but the other two. But the problem with social media is it's a very low touch initiative. Like the moment they shut down their phone, like volunteering is so much more high touch. It's so much more real. It's so much more personal. It wins all the time. And even people who are working, there's a lot of these things about working professionals are not the best volunteers. They don't have enough time. The truth is working professionals desperately need a break from the work that they have, and they are really looking forward to like interesting ways to actually spend their time during their break time. So there's actually like volunteering again plays a very critical role there. Where I feel that volunteering fails, volunteering when it finally comes head to head with marriage, at least in MAD, we have not really figured out a way to deal with that. Normally, almost always marriage wins, which is fair because marriage is probably like you get like a pretty big sense of purpose. I don't know if it expands your horizon, but probably it expands your horizon from like a new set of families kind of enter your space, and you have a tribe of your own, which is like your own family. But I think more importantly, like your weekends become volunteering weekends are kind of important. Your weekends become almost dedicated to your family, which means that it becomes difficult to be part of a volunteering organization like Make a Difference. So just wanted to put this here just from sense of like what are okay reasons for people to not volunteer and what are not okay reasons. So we should, as people who are mobilizing volunteers, we shouldn't consider colleges or social media or work as competition to us. Volunteering is a much more potent and much more powerful tool when used well, and young people shouldn't even consider these things if you're doing volunteering the right way. But obviously that's not really the case many a times. And what our understanding to some extent is that many a times what we have realized is that volunteering is closer to community building than employment. Many times people do look at volunteering as like, okay, volunteering is free employment. People, instead of doing a job, they are doing it for free, which is not our experience of it. We really see it as, like an employment model is very different from a community building model. An employment model focuses a lot more on the extrinsic motivations. So there are volunteering models that's based on the employment model, where they get certificates at the end of it, they get a letter of recommendation, they probably get like a kudos in social media, thank you for volunteering, or, here is an award, you're a best volunteer, things like that. Or even, some organizing go all the way as like, you get like a special privilege to get into like an Ivy League school if you volunteer with us, or if you do our fellowships and things like that. These are all extrinsic motivations, which works, but I don't think volunteering is in that space, and you will not be really able to leverage the full value of volunteering through these kind of systems. Well, if you look at the community building in the community model, those are not the those are not the reasons. It's purely based on intrinsic motivation. You're able to make a difference in a child's life. Is your volunteering model built on the primarily on that connection between the volunteer and the child, and the volunteer is really inspired by the being able to make the difference in the child's life, or whatever your beneficiary is, working together towards a better tomorrow. Like that's really what's driving people, genuine authentic connections, your growth and development, like from a not from an L&D, but more like I am becoming a better human being. Like those are the kind of motivations that we should nurture, that we can nurture in our organizations, than the left ones. I have a lot of issues with extrinsic motivations. And there's so much data and there's research on how extrinsic motivations can have a negative impact in the long term, things like that. In MAD too, I think we do give certificates, but it's not really worth anything. And we don't really give it too much importance. And we don't, we have not engaged with any organization saying that if you're a MAD volunteer, if a MAD volunteer comes to you, will you give them special privileges, which we don't, right? That's with regards to that. The other part of the employment model is that you are responsible for a task. There's a task breakdown, and different tasks are there, and everybody is responsible for their respective task. And as long as you come and do that task, it's done. It's a good model. It works. The only problem is that it really reduces the ownership of the larger or cause many a times when you kind of act in that way. While in a community model, you're not responsible for one task. You're responsible for a task, but also ensure that the whole community is able to do that task. And that is, even though it sounds like more work, that is actually a more holistic way for a young person to understand and engage in the community. So we feel that volunteering that gives them a slightly larger vantage point to act than just a task does help. Everybody in the employment model, everybody contributes equally. Everybody has got a specific role and they do that role. And as long as you do that role, you're good. If you don't do that role, you're asked to leave. But the truth that we've realized in the volunteering model, which is based on like community-based system, everybody contributes to their ability. Some people contribute a lot, and some people contribute just the bare minimum. And there is space for both of those people. And while designing your volunteering system, have you created space for both? Like, when it comes to fundraising, and fundraising, people will organize and they do fundraising, definitely knows that when we do fundraising, there are like the top 10% of the volunteers are raising like 1 lakh or more, and then there are most people are only raising 10,000 to 12,000 rupees, but there is that lack. And is there a space in your system for both of those people to coexist and be respected, loved, and accepted, and feel a sense of belonging? Right? Or is it like tight? And which is sometimes the case. Like, all you can do is turn up for class on a week-on-week basis. If you do not turn up for the class for 2 weeks, you're asked to leave. And it's not like one person can turn up for 5 classes. So that spectrum is kind of missing, and that space is not there. So being able to create that space helps, is what we feel. And the final part about the employment model of volunteering is, it's a short-term engagement. You volunteer with us for today, this month, this year, but at the end of it, it's over. And then you can become like an alumni or something. But then you really, what you're using, you will basically get updates from us, and we'll ask you for donating money to us. There's no real long-term engagement that is there in the employment model, because in a company that doesn't make sense properly. But in the community building model, we are really shooting for lifelong engagement. Not between the organization, but between the child and the volunteer. The children in Make a Difference, one of the core things that they need is, when a child is brought into a childcare institution, their existing community, they're broken from their existing community. And they need not a new community, but they need more communities, more support systems to, help them through life. And every volunteer who walks into a child's life for us is a potential to be part of that community. And our real objective is, how do we work with them? How do we build the organization in such a way that there is space for this person to stay in touch with the child for the rest of their life and be a real support system? So building models which are not like employment models, trying to use employment models for volunteering is limiting. Trying to use like a community building approach to volunteering really makes it, really brings out the true power of volunteering, is how we understood it. Okay.
Jithin,
Yes.
I had a question.
Sure.
So, what if someone have you had ever experienced someone from the community build-up model who is entering the employment model? I mean, I think, for example, if a volunteer who has been volunteering for a different causes, and then that person enters the employment sector in the same social sector, obviously. So, what exactly is there a difference in that person, or is it again the same?
So yeah, that's what if a volunteer becomes an employee, right? Like a full-time. So in MAD, we differentiate this as a volunteer and a full-timer. A full-time, we don't really see too much of a difference between a volunteer and an employee, because like the employee has one more additional incentive, which is money, to be able to do it. But frankly, what we realize that most of our employees are really not doing this for money. They are like, the reason money is given is because a volunteer is spending their free time doing volunteering stuff. They have another core job that they have, which is how is sustaining themselves. A full-timer is somebody who's saying, I want to do this my whole life. This is what I want to dedicate my life to. This is what my full life is about. And when they're going to spend their full life doing this, they need to be, they need to somehow live. They have to survive. So money becomes an additional incentive that goes into it. But like we don't have a tired, there's no incentive for somebody who works hard or anything like that. Everybody gets the same amount of money, and our pay scale is pretty decent for people to not worry about money anymore. But beyond that, we still want them to be driven by the same reasons. We still want them to function the same way, because we genuinely believe that a volunteer, like a community building model of employment, is better than an employment model itself, because an employment model does not really, to provide you a larger purpose and things like that, purpose alignment and things like that. It's not the best model, is our understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome. So others also please feel free to stop me whenever they need be. Cool, awesome. So now in MAD, we have adapted the community building model to build what we call a self-organizing community model. And this model that we created is everything. I'm pretty much sure this is there in the world. I'm just saying what we are doing, and hopefully there is something to learn from this. So the self-organizing community model basically means that as a volunteer, you're first a community member. And you're not just responsible for spending the 2 hours teaching the child, but also that is your first responsibility. But the equally important responsibility is to ensure that the community is active and is able to support the children throughout the year. Because the volunteer is clearly understood that what is really happening is that the child needs an 18-year-long unbroken support system. And only when that 18-year-long support system is provided can the child come out of it and say they've broken the vicious cycle of poverty. And you're playing only 1 year of that. And it doesn't matter how well you do your 2 hours of volunteering. If next year the chain is broken, all the work that we've put in is wasted. So it is not just important for us to provide support to the child, but also maintain the community infrastructure. So a volunteer is responsible to source other volunteers in the system, recruit them into the system, induct them into the system, mobilize and deliver, ensure that we are delivering together. So there is a responsibility. If the community is not delivering together, if you're hitting your targets, but the community is not hitting your targets, you're still figuring out ways that you're still expected to do something about it. Raise funds, raise the necessary resources that is required for the community. Retain people. Every year we want around 50 to 60% of our volunteers to be in the organization, so that the new people who are coming in, the culture does not fundamentally change, and the new people who are coming in can be handholded into it. And finally, succession planning, identifying the new leaders. Every year the community is not 100, like a self-organizing community does not mean everybody is a leader. We have tried that. We have not been able to make it work. We feel that there is a need for leadership at the community level also, and the leadership can change every year. And we feel the leadership should change every year. Everybody should get a chance to be a leader at some point in their life. And that kind of gives them a larger perspective, a better perspective, and become a better community member also. So the succession planning is how you cycle through leaders on a year-on-year basis. And everybody participates in it, and everybody ensures that their community has the necessary number of leaders to support the community going forward. So the sustenance of the community is also the responsibility of an average volunteer, and we keep this as the responsibility of a volunteer. And just to kind of give you some clarity on what we see as the role of a community leader in MAD, we feel that because it's not the job of a boss, which is to tell people what to do. It is really, number one, to provide order, because a lot of people are working together. You do need somebody to kind of overlook from top and ensure that things are going in an organized manner. If chaos can prevail, and once chaos happens, it really is a demotivation for people in the community. Tend to the community culture. Then you need somebody who has like a larger understanding of where everybody is, and see how the culture of the organization is evolving, and based on that, of the community is evolving, and tend to it and ensure that the culture is positive. Because again, once the culture goes negative, you'll have a huge exodus from the organization. It has happened in MAD multiple times, and we've experienced it. And there's nothing wrong in it. It happens, but it is an important role as a leader to kind of tend to the culture and ensure maintain it. Mobilization, this is a big part of it, which is that the truth is the leader is the one who's really inspiring people to keep doing what needs to be done. An average person on a day-to-day basis, because they are kind of pulled in so many directions as a volunteer, they may not really every day turn up for class by themselves all the time. You need to build a sense of energy all points of time to kind of inspire people by talking about what are all the amazing things that's happening, amazing stories of children, amazing things where other young people who are doing interesting stuff, by giving them opportunities, really there is a level of energy with which volunteering operates. And building that energy really is the responsibility of the leaders, and the leaders have to come together and provide that kind of energy at all points. And you cannot be that, okay, it's a self-organizing community, everybody should be doing their job by themselves. If people are not turning up, that because they are not self-organized? Not really. It's not a self-mobilizing community. We have not fully figured that out yet. Mobilization still lies with the leader. And finally, appreciation. There is a need as a leader to ensure that the volunteers feel seen for the work that they are putting in. It's not so they are appreciated for their own personal glory, but more to do with there is a part of volunteering that we feel that shines when it's seen, that it's not seen by everybody, but at least seen by the leader in the system. And hence that hierarchy in some way, if you want to call it, does help. So there is a hierarchy in the community that we run, and this is how the hierarchy is used in the community. And because the hierarchy is like a churning hierarchy, there's nobody who's always the leader. Anybody can be a leader if they stand up for it. So that's the role of a leader in the MAD community that we are building. I'll just quickly talk, because I spoke about the role of a leader is to maintain the community, the culture. It is important for us. We are really a value-driven organization. Like we drive a lot of mobilization through values. We don't know how we would have done it without values. Like a volunteer cannot be like, there are control systems or culture systems to get people to do something. An employment model, you use a lot more control systems because, they're dependent on you for salary. So they will do whatever it takes. They'll do a lot more. But in a volunteering model, control systems don't really, hold too much. Like you can have some control systems, but majority of it should be culture. It should come from within. And the direction that people flow is based on the value. So people take decisions based on the value systems and not because of the control systems. So the 3 value systems that we have in MAD is first is cause about self, which is really about working towards something which is large, realizing that when you're in your purpose space, when you're in MAD, you are not the most important person. You're not acting in your best interest. You're acting in the child's best interest. And it's not just you. Everybody's acting in the child's best interest. And that really enables us to have that alignment as an organization. The next is leadership through ownership, which really is giving the ownership of any challenges. In a community, you will constantly face challenges. When you face a challenge, the ownership is on you to fix it. And you can, and you are empowered, and the organization is here to support you in whichever way possible. But at the end of the day, if you don't fix it, nobody's going to fix it. Like it's not a top-down model where you can write a ticket to somebody at the top and they will then come down and fix it for you. That's not really like a community is. You have the ownership to solve the problem themselves. And sometimes then you will see a problem which you don't have the energy to fix. Then you will probably not complain about it, which is also really useful. Otherwise, it's community models are chaotic in their own ways, and it's very easy to kind of let okay, that is not working, this is not working. But like having this value really focuses the volunteer on, can I do something about it? If I can't, let me not bother about it and let me continue on my journey. That's been the thing. And sense of family is a critical thing for MAD, because the realization that we are, as volunteers, one big family for the children that we are working with, and hence having each other's back. So if anybody needs a support, we will be there to support them, because through supporting them, we will be able to support the child. And that's our understanding of it. So these 3 are the value systems that we have in MAD. We recommend every organization, like our model is based on value-based volunteering. So recommend having your own value systems that will kind of connect to the volunteers, and really using these value systems to drive change in the organization. We also have a set of culture that we follow. These are practices that we follow in the organization that enables the values to be lived. Because value system in a lot of ways is not for the other person, it's only for yourself. It is for you to see, take decisions for yourself. You're not going to judge another person. Okay, this person does not put cause above self, or this person is not taking leadership ownership. It's not for the other person. It's really for yourself. But culture is basically the actions that as an organization, we are constantly creating space for, to ensure that, like there is this kind of a culture that's really flowing in the organization. It's a leader's responsibility really to ensure that these cultures are really happening in the organizations through rituals and routines and things like that. Cool. So this is, so far we have kind of come to like the soft side of the community model. Now let me actually go into the actual numbers of the community model, which is like, what are the numbers? What have we understood as, to have a self-organizing community? What kind of numbers make sense? What we feel is that for a volunteer to connect to the cause at depth, you can go from, they can be connected to 1 beneficiary to a maximum of 5 beneficiaries. Anything beyond that, it is really hard to form those kind of deep connections. And we know what volunteering programs where you're teaching 25 children, 30 children at a time. We don't do that simply because we feel that then it kind of becomes like very peripheral. And what tends to happen is that the volunteer might still end up forming connections with only 1 or 2 of those 3 or such people. And more importantly, for the child to be able to form a connection back, the one is, like 1 child to 5, 1 to 5 is what we will kind of, what we feel is like a good volunteer to beneficiary ratio according to, in our model. Every volunteer needs mentorship in the system, and we provide a mentor in the system who's not a very highly trained person. This is somebody who's probably spent a year or two more than the volunteer doing the job that the volunteer has done before. That's it. That's really so it's more like a real world on ground hand holding support for, when the volunteer is like, first year can be quite overwhelming for volunteers, and helping them make sense of it and knowing that there is somebody there. And this again, the mentor. So we have these mentors in the system, and we feel like a 5 to 10. One mentor can handle 5 to 10 volunteers maximum. Beyond, once it goes beyond 10 volunteers, they're not really be able to provide that mentoring support. The volunteers won't get the support that they need, and hence they start dropping out. Because the dropout starts happening not because they are not mobilized. They start happening many a times. Dropouts happen because their work is too challenging. At least in MAD, that's the this thing. It's not fun anymore. It's very difficult. They don't know how to deal with it, and having the right mentor will really help you stick through the whole year in the system. And then we have something called a circle. A circle is what is the smallest, biggest number that a group of people who can work together and be responsible for some kind of an ownership or a collective or something like that. We call it a circle, which is that up to 25 to 50 people can be part of a circle, and these 25 to 50 people can be a support system for each other. When they are, these 25 to 50 people, if they're doing the same thing, like teaching a child or mentoring a child or raising funds, because it's just 25 to 50, there is enough variance in it that you will get a lot of ideas, and if somebody needs support, somebody will be ready to help each other out. And there is, the number is big enough to bring in a lot more diversity, which is very important. But it is not too big that up to 50 people, they still have some kind of connections with each other. And hence, because they have that connection, they are willing to support when somebody is asking for help. Just because somebody asks for help doesn't mean people will turn up. People will support because they, I have met this person once, couple of times, I know this person, we have had some conversations. When that person is asking a question, it's easier for me to respond and be that support for each other. And finally, we call one community is the maximum size that we feel that one self-organizing group, like with a leader, can actually handle. If you have around 5 to 6 leaders, how many people can they handle? Just around 200 to 250 people. Beyond that, volunteer leaders struggle to kind of handle numbers bigger than that, according to us. So Make a Difference does not have full-time employees on ground to manage volunteers. We are 100% managed by volunteers themselves, and we follow these numbers inside the organization to be able to provide the necessary support. None of these people are getting paid in the system. So these are the leadership profiles. Okay, let me just talk. There's one more slide after this, but what are the leadership now? For one community, what are the different leaders that you need in a community to be able to ensure that it's a self-organizing community? One is you need a community lead itself who's kind of overseeing the whole thing, one who's really responsible for the culture. We have circle leads who's really responsible for the, one community of 200 people will have 4 to 5 circles within them. So the circle there, and that circle also will have a lead to kind of organize them. And then we have program fellows, like somebody, you can call him lead or whatever you want to call it. Like a program person is the person who's there to provide programmatic support. Whatever your program is, how to do that program better. For example, if you're teaching English, how to teach English better, supporting volunteers by training them, by providing support to the mentors in different ways and things like that. That's what the program fellows do. MAD has quite a lot of program fellows because we have a lot of programs. But you can have just one program fellow also. And then you need to have human capital fellow whose primary responsibility is to manage the project of sourcing, recruitment, induction, and maintenance of the and the retention of the volunteer base. So everybody will participate in it, but they are the one, the human capital fellow is the one who's kind of holding that as a project and ensuring that that is happening on a year-on-year basis. Fundraising fellow is, everybody is responsible for fundraising, but fundraising fellow is the one who's kind of determines what is going to be the beneficiary cost for that year and how can we all raise funds for it. And he will have a team of people who will coach people on how exactly they can raise funds within their community so that they're able to hit the overall target. So the fellow is kind of responsible for fundraising. And the campaigns fellow is really responsible for the overall communication inside the organization. once you get to 200 and 250 people, there's a lot of communications that is needed, that brings in a lot of the mobilization happens through communication. When everybody is aware of what is going on, the level of ownership is a lot higher. And, you get to hear the best practices, you get to hear the war stories and highlights and children's doing things well. All of those things are important. And there's a communications fellow who's responsible to show those stories and really focus on ensuring that everybody is kind of hearing that. So this is the team that, the community lead really holds. And it's the community lead who's responsible to kind of mobilize the whole community, and they work with all of these players to kind of ensure that it is mobilized and it is self-sustaining, and that year it does well. So these are the roles, that profiles that we recommend as an organization. And finally, this is the amount of time an average volunteer will need to spend in a month to be able to be part of a self-organizing community. They need to spend a minimum of 2 hours a week teaching the child, working with the direct beneficiary itself. That's for the deep connection that they have with the child itself. Another 2 hours they need to spend on their own learning and development. Volunteering by itself, just because you're ready to volunteer, does not mean you have the skills to volunteer. Working with a child who is in need of care and protection, or working with young people who have experienced abuse, these are all really complicated things. And they need constant learning and development, upskilling yourself to be able to do that. And if you're not committed to doing that, you will not be able to, the value of impact is quite limited. So being able to spend 2 hours on a weekly basis to kind of manage those learning and development hours. And, it also, in many ways, it's on their own growth. They're very happy to do it also, but they need to keep aside the 2 hours for that. And another 4 hours a week for community building, which is that, that there is sourcing happening, being able to, campaign and source volunteers, or recruit volunteers, or onboard volunteers, or, there'll be something or the other, like, or raise funds, or there is some young person who needs a job now, so we need some support to kind of help them find a job. There's always some work, or volunteers are not turning up to class regularly. There is a high absenteeism rate or high substitution rate. How do we solve it? How do we build some, mobilizations, I think. So there is things to do at the community level itself. And there is work to be done at that community level. And that is another 4 hours of the time that they need to actually spend. And once in a month, there is something called a community circle, which is the whole community coming together to see where have they reached as a community and understand the overall indicators of the community. How's the community doing with regards to the child impact? How the community is doing with regards to operational impact? Where are the gaps? What can we do as a collective to solve it and resolve it? And how can we move forward? So the community kind of coming together to make itself visible. And I think one question that everybody will have when you see it is that, but only the 2 hours is directly to the beneficiary. Everything else, that you need to put in almost like 10 hours, more than 10 hours, like, 6 hours a week, plus 4 hours a month to be able to just ensure those 2 hours of beneficiary support is happening. And the honest truth is, yes, that is what it actually takes to build a self-organizing community. This is what we do in MAD right now. And we feel it's completely fine, because by doing it this way, we are able to have thousands of volunteers. We are able to get millions of hours to the child at a price point which makes it okay. We have not figured out any other way. We have not figured out how to get full-time employees to be able to do all this stuff at a price point that makes sense. So volunteering is different from employment. You can look at it from, like, let me just hire one full-time employee and let them do the whole thing. It just doesn't work in some spaces, and we work kind of operate in that space. So that's with regards to time required in the self-organizing community model. And I think this is the final second last slide that I have. With that, after that, we can probably stop for questions, which is, these are the roles that we have. So an average self-organizing community will have 200 volunteers who will spend 2 hours a week on direct beneficiary support, 2 hours on 0 hour. 0 hour is where everybody from the circle, not the community circle, comes together, and they go through L&D. They understand what are the larger challenges in the circle, and is there something that they need to do to contribute towards it? What are the collaborative projects that's going on at this point of time, and what is their role in it? Is their community in a safe circle, safe or not? Things like that. And community building, which I already spoke to you about. That's what a volunteer does. For a 200 volunteers, there will be 20 mentors who are also volunteers, and they'll spend around 4 hours on one-on-one support. Again, they will be there for the 0 hour because they'll be providing support to the volunteers, and they'll also be actively contributing to the community building. So the number of hours is slightly more for them. And fellows actually have a lot more hours that they need to spend. but there are only 10 fellows. So that's why fellowship is not something that's like a every year thing. It's a once in a year. Well, once in 5 years, you as a community member will need to step up and become a fellow, where you put in more hours than everybody else. But that 1 hour will be that 1 year will be an intense experience for you, but you will also learn and grow a lot, and you have a better understanding of how a community operates, which you will become a better community member. But also, more importantly, somebody has to do it regularly. So it comes from that space. So that's the community building model. We have around 340 fellows, 20 fellows across the country right now to run the organization that we are part of, and every year new fellows come in. So it's not that impossible to be able to have them. Yeah, I think this is the last slide that I have, which is now a community. This is one community of 200 people. This is what the size is. Now, if you have to scale it, what does that look like? Well, the best number that we found for scale is 25 communities. Like once you have 25 communities, like we feel that one associate or one employee can handle up to 25 communities at a time, not the whole community, one vertical of a community. So you need to have one employee. We have one employee per vertical. What is a vertical for us? These are all verticals. So we'll have one employee for providing support to the community leaders. So it'll be 25 community leaders from 25 communities will be supported by one employee. One for one for 20 circle leads, programs, human capital, fundraising, and campaigns. So these are all verticals, and each vertical will require one employee to be able to be that's how we see scaling. But that vertical employee will not be working alone with those 25 people. They will get force. We call them strategists. It's a term we have, but they're more or less like mentors for the fellows. These are people who have been fellows themselves multiple times and understand that really well, and they tend to be like a mentor-like person for the fellows. So with one full-time employee and 4 volunteer mentors who support the fellows, you'll be able to run 25 self-sustaining communities. And how do we run it? Every week there is a call between there is a weekly vertical call between the employee, full-time employee, and the 25 people from the community, from their 25 communities. And it's in that weekly call is almost like there is some mobilization that happens, and there is some project management that happens through that thing. So there is, they build connections, they mobilize with each other, and there is a lot of support provided on how to run the community on a week-on-week basis. So there is weekly support provided for the people who become fellows in the organization to be able to run the community well from our side. And that's every Wednesday, we have a weekly vertical call. Every Thursday, we have a weekly community call where all the members of one community comes together for a call with one full-time employee, where that full-time employee, who we call a city mentor, is really providing them an understanding of, helping them, work as a community as a whole, because all the others are working as vertical. The weekly community call is where the whole community comes together and understands how as a community we are kind of working together. So that happens every Thursday. And every quarter, we have something called a social, where the whole organization comes together, where you get to know what are the projects that's coming in the upcoming quarter and what is the role that they need to play in it, and giving them clarity on the same. So through this, you will be able to kind of scale the community model, at 25 batches is what I would say. And just 125 batch of a community, self-organizing community, you will be able to get more than 1 million volunteer hours a year. For sure. And so yeah, that's our learnings, that's our understanding of volunteering in Make a Difference. And yeah, open to anybody. Hope it made sense. If there's any questions, happy to answer the same.
Thanks, Jithin. For those of you who've joined us a little later, I see a lot of new people. We are going to do a quick poll now, based on what we've just heard, and see how some of the learnings can be relevant and contextual to your organizations and the work that you do. Just launching the poll now. So the structure is we'll do this poll for a minute or so, see what the responses are like, followed by a more detailed Q&A either through chat, or you can unmute yourselves and ask any questions or reactions that you might have for Jithin, followed by a quick poll towards the very end, again, to get a sense of your experience from your side. I hope you can see the poll now. we've also added the question that Jithin had mentioned around the factors that influence your current volunteer mobilization framework, and also the ones that you wish to add to your organization. I hope you can see the poll. It'll be nice to hear from people on what your biggest challenges are currently when it comes to scaling up your volunteering initiatives. Oh. In case you're unable to see the poll, it's likely that you may not have an updated version of Zoom. I think that's a disclaimer that we had gotten from Zoom saying that only people.
Yeah, or maybe if you see an option right next to the chat option, there's an option that says polls. If you click on that, you might be able to see it. And if you're on your phone, there's a 3 dot where you can go and check if there are polls. Yes. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Megha. Cool. 15 of you have already responded. Good to see some of the responses pouring in. We'll take another 30 seconds for everybody to respond. Yeah. Meanwhile, if you've already responded, please feel free to add your questions to the chat so we can jump directly into Q&A after we hear from everybody. Last 10 seconds in case you haven't responded to the poll, please do that. Okay, superb. So we're ending the poll. Okay, wait, a lot of people are now responding. Last 10 seconds, everyone. Then we check. Okay, I am sharing the poll responses for everybody to see. Some interesting trends between the factors that currently influence their volunteer framework versus the ones they want to implement. Cool. We'll be sharing responses to the polls also with all of you post the conversation. Over to Q&A. Either add questions to the chat or you can also unmute yourselves and ask questions directly to Jithin.
Yes, I saw from Karthi from Karthi, sorry. How is the L&D happening in the organization and what kind of curriculum? So I can probably quickly start with that. Our learning with regards to L&D has been that it makes sense to have shorter duration, regular L&D happening throughout the year. For a volunteering model, that makes a lot more sense than trying to do one big L&D in the beginning of the year. So what we do is, just to give you one example, for building authentic connections with the child, we use this framework called the Developmental Relationships Framework, which is used by the Search Institute. They have developed the framework themselves. And what we have done is, we've got an Akanksha Thakur, who's like a pretty well-versed person, well-trained person in education sector in India. She kind of customized that and built a module for that for Make a Difference. So what she does is that she does a 2-hour session first for volunteers when they join the organization to kind of get them to understand what developmental relationships are. But then she has built 6 other modules for 45 minutes each, which will be delivered during our 0 hours. 0 hours is something that happens before every week. We have a 0 hour before the class that they're going into. So every week before going to class, they get like a 45 minutes of thing where they're able to kind of get deeper into the developmental relationships framework. And by doing that, volunteers are able to it's fresher, they're able to use, and it becomes, and they have a debrief after the class where they're able to see if they're able to kind of use it and things like that. So that's how we do our L&D. which means that our fellows are the ones who are delivering L&D. Only the first L&D training is done by a trained professional. After that, it's kind of done by the fellows itself. So we need to kind of keep it simple and things like that. Happy to share our L&D modules with you guys if that's interesting. But that's basically how we do L&D on one side. The second part of it is that, like for example, when CFR is community fundraising is happening, there will be some L&D provided for that specific thing, like for example, how to pitch or how to do network mapping and things like that. So how to kind of keep your L&D short and relevant to what you're immediately about to do, and through reflection, how are you able to learn from it and provide you with some kind of a coach. So when you're doing fundraising, there is a fundraising coach that you have who's a fundraising volunteer who's done some fundraising before. They're not like professional coaches, they're not that good, but there's somebody who's kind of there to kind of guide you through it if you have any doubts and things like that. And that itself is many times enough, is what we have noticed. What kind of curriculum you create for students? We have created some curriculum on our own, which is for foundations program 10 to 13. We have built our own curriculum, but we have also adopted the curriculum from Dream a Dream for our dream camps. So, and we are definitely more interested in, if there's a third party who's already having the curriculum, like the development relationships, we would like to kind of use it. So the intention is to use existing content because there are already people who are doing phenomenal work in all of this. I hope that answered the question.
There are a few, I'll maybe read out the questions for you.
Sure.
There are a couple of questions around volunteer demographic, like what's the average age profile, and how do you go about recruiting so many volunteers in that demographic, and is there any technology platform that you use to recruit and manage these volunteers?
So age demography is primarily like 18 years to 25 years. That's really the strength, and like there will be a bump between 18 to 21, and then it's like a smaller number, but there is still, we are finding more and more people from the working demography being part of the organization. Recruitment is simple. Every volunteer every year is told, who is the best person for the child. Why don't you go out there and talk to your friends and identify the friends who you think are the best mad volunteers, convince them, make them understand why volunteering is important, and bring them into the organization. This year, an average volunteer brought in three people into the system, and we gamify it a little bit. Like for example, we have our own technology platform where every volunteer gets their own link, and we create our own social media campaigns, which is for the volunteer, not for MAT. So the volunteer can drive. We give the volunteers the collaterals to drive a social media campaign in their personal social media, and they put the link there, and we are able to track nationally how many volunteers registered, how many applicants registered through each volunteer, and not just we, but at every circle, how many people have come. So so it's a very simple, straightforward thing. As a community, we need 300 volunteers this year, which means that we need to at least source 5x of that. That is 1,500 applicants we need. Let's go out and do it. And you will have a number which says how many people from the community, what is the applicant number for this community, how many people have been able to brought in from each of these people. And it's an internal technology platform we developed over on Zoho Recruit, on Zoho Creator. We are happy to share it again, but there is some, we have to pay money to Zoho to do it, and there is some customization that you might be required, but we are happy to share that. So really, that is what our strong way to, the best people to source volunteers are your existing volunteers, and they know 5 to 10 people. How can you empower them to find the right 5 to 10 people and bring them into and get them to convince them to bring them into the system? Just like raising funds, the same way you can also raise other resources, and that's pretty much this thing that we have. Does that make sense, Raj?
Yeah. Then there's a question around success parameters, especially when you're talking about building such a large community at scale. What are some of the indicators that you use to measure the health of your community at that scale?
Amazing. So we have something called, what we do is, okay, fine. Let me just read out some of the indicators that we have from community point of view. A community is healthy if it has less than 5% average session cancellation. If classes are less than 5% of the classes are getting cancelled, it's healthy. Less than 5% average volunteer substitution rate. Less than 5% child absenteeism rate. Children are getting absent. Less than 5% volunteer absenteeism rate. Over 90% 0-hour attendance. Over 90% 0-hour satisfaction rate. 95% session to child ideal ratio is maintained. So the number of volunteer to child that is needed, that ratio is maintained 95% of the time. And less than 15% of the volunteers in negative credits, which is an internal thing, that system that we use to kind of put volunteers, rate volunteers. So this is what is the operational indicators for the community. And if a community is meeting all of this, the community is doing really well. And if the community is not doing these things, there's gaps in the health, and they have a dashboard, and they need to kind of now work on. Then they come together, they figure out how they can improve it. These are the weekly. This data they get on a weekly basis. What they will also have is project based. So, for example, when sourcing is going on, there will be a sourcing target for the community. When recruitment is going on, there will be a recruitment target. When city circles are going on, there will be a participation target. What is the percentage of volunteers who participated in that? When community fundraising is going on, there will be a fundraising target. And at the end of the year, the volunteers get to know how many children passed each of the exams, how many children got into colleges, how many children got jobs, what were the jobs that they got into, and all those things at the end of the year. So there's a weekly, period-wise, quarterly and yearly data that a volunteer gets, based on which they can become an active member of the community.
Okay. And a related question that's just come in from Jwalen is around reporting and documentation. What does that structure look like for you?
Reporting and documentation to whom? Is it reporting to the volunteer, reporting to the donor? Is that what it is?
Jwalen, please feel free to unmute and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it means volunteer reporting and documentation to maybe the fellows or the stats or the program managers, maybe.
Reporting to the, okay.
So basically, if a volunteer, for example, is doing that session for the week, what does that reporting mechanism?
Got it.
Yeah.
We have around 10 years back, when we scaled, we built our own ERP system. So after every class, the volunteer, the mentor marks the attendance of all the volunteers who came, which are sorry. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. So we have our own ERP system where the volunteer allocated to classes in the ERP system. So at the end of every class, the volunteer marks which are the children who turned up for the class, and some indicators about how well the child was prepared for it and all those kind of things. The mentor marks the attendance of the volunteers who turned up for the class to say whether they were on time, whether they turned up for 0 hour, and things like that. So when there's an event, we have an app called Invite, which is again like a part of it, where we mark the attendance of people who turned up and participated for events. And when it comes to sourcing or CFR, again, there are apps for these where you update your numbers, and that's how we kind of get dashboards centrally to be able to do this. One thing I can probably quickly do is share like a quick dashboard that we used, like how the reporting happens. Like there are, let's say now sourcing just happened. So there will be a dashboard like this, which kind of provides what is the target, how many people have actually signed up, how many volunteers, how many, this Vishal Dua has brought in 105 signups, who are the top people, and how the roles are getting filled and things like that. So there will be like tools like this. So this is for CFR. So this is for volunteer recruitment. We'll have similar for fundraising, how much money is coming through that. We'll have similar for programs, how much is happening, things like that. I think you are getting a sense of it. So we collect data through these ERP systems, and we put it out there through Power BI is the tool that we use to drive that.
Okay, so actually, my question, as Dharmaraj had rightly put it, one more thing was that how are the child indicators also managed? Like you might have some indicators relating to children as well. Like if this much studying has been done, or so and so and so. So is that also being tracked by you, or just the volunteers go and do the work?
So there are around 3-4 indicators that we capture at the end of the class with regards from a check for understanding perspective on the child, and the system has the ability to track it. But the honest truth at this point of time is that we haven't reached that stage of, like, we want to get to the point where we are using that data to provide more dedicated support to the volunteer. we have not gotten there yet. So the system actually has, every class has like some indicators that we ask for. There is check for understanding from the child perspective. There's a participation level from the child's perspective. There is some life skill stuff about how motivated is the child and all those kind of stuff. So there are a bunch of such indicators that we do track, but we have not really used it enough for
Yes,
programmatic
that
improvement
is
yet.
what I was trying to understand. How is that indicators being reported to you? Like you do track it, how is it being collected or reported?
So we have something called a MAD app, which is an application, mobile phone application, through which after every class, a volunteer marks, volunteer says, okay, which all children turned up for the class, and for each of the child, some indicators where that is basically what is provided. And Power BI itself will have that will be reported on using Power BI as a platform.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, and Power BI, you can slice and dice it based on community. So it can be like for one class to the whole organization, you can kind of do the whole thing. So you need some kind of a system to collect data and some kind of system to show provide visibility to that data.
There's one more question around attrition. So what do attrition numbers look like for you, and how do you solve for that?
Mid-year attrition is not that high. Once the volunteer, so the way we solve for it is, number one, we do try to hire a buffer so for example, ideally need one volunteer for 5 children for one class. Our volunteer targets many times itself many classes will have 2 volunteers itself, which means that there is some redundancy that we are bringing from the very beginning. That's point number one. Point number 2 is, which means that, and in the first 1 week, 1 month to 1 quarter, 1 week to 1 month is when the highest number of people who end up joining end up dropping out, because they join, they realize that this is too complicated for them, this is not really up their alley and things like that, and there is a dropout that we happen, which we are completely okay with, because the system has space to do that. Obviously they're trained and all that stuff, but it's okay. The training investment is not that high, and people should be given some space to see and experience and leave also. Once that happens, normally the attrition rate is not that high. It changes city to city based on the community leaders and things like that. So it's not like there is one final number, but normally it's like a 7% to 10% in-year attrition overall is what we kind of experience. And a retention of around, so last year we experienced around 60% of the volunteers who were in the system continued in the system for the next year. So the retention, so we maintain in-year attrition and retention. And that's basically, these are the numbers that we are currently dealing with at this point of time. Although this year, I must say that even though we retained a higher number of people, when the classes actually started because of COVID and because there's a huge gap between the classes ending and classes starting, a lot of the people that we retained did not actually continue, and the retention number actually reduced. So that's probably a fair thing to say. But in-year attrition is fairly in the manageable. 7 to 15% is probably the range that we currently experience.
Sort of a related question to that, I think Shivanshu has asked around remote engagement of volunteers and remote management of volunteers. So if an organization is building a model where it might be a virtual kind of volunteering, where the volunteer and the child might be interacting virtually, what does that engagement model look like? Do you think there is a huge difference between a human intervention based engagement level between the volunteer and the child? And how was remote management for you during COVID? Like, because a lot of the stuff that you were doing offline moved online. So what did that look like, Matt?
We survived. That's basically the best thing I would say. We are waiting for just childcare institutions to be accessible again, probably by March or next June. Hopefully things will kind of stabilize and we want to kind of get back into classes. The connections that we're able to build between a volunteer and child is a lot harder. The truth is also that we also knew that we will be able to get on ground sooner than later. And hence we did not double down on it beyond a point. But if we know, if we are forced to be in a situation where everything is going to be online for the rest of our lives, there are ways to figure it out. We just need to radically change our programmatic delivery systems, which we did not do because we knew that we were going to come back. Where post-pandemic, the way we are kind of seeing the whole thing panning out is we are going to continue our online interventions. So what it's enabled us is that earlier we couldn't do classes on weekdays because the time children are free are normally 7 to 8 or 7 to 10, 7 to 9. And that's the time when volunteers cannot be in a childcare institution because it's too late and things like that. now, because online, now we are able to do classes during that time, which frees up the weekends for us to do more exposure-based activities, more life skills-based activities, emotional health-based activities. So that's really the change that we are kind of bringing about. But yeah, it's not like volunteers not meeting each other regularly and all those things does have an impact on the overall morale, and it's solvable. But if you have an option, meet on ground. That's what I would recommend.
There's also a question from Ashutosh, who is a MAD alumni from Bhopal. And he says his question is around whether, or rather what aspects of everything you said, whether it's around sourcing of volunteers to the whole aspect of community building, how does that work for working professionals? If you've had experience, either a MAD volunteer entering as a working professional or when they transition into a working professional, how does that sort of engagement play out?
Well, there both are possible. Like there are because now MAD is there in all the cities that they're going to. Normally, the reason somebody quits MAD is because they're leaving that city and they're going to another city. So that's when the engagement ends. If they're getting a job in the same place, they tend to continue. Is basically what our experience is. But yeah, like I don't know. I don't have more than that to share. Like, does that answer your question, or is there anything more specific that you would like to know?
Ashutosh, feel free.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Jithin. So I really wanted to understand, so the model of Make a Difference, the value we talk about, and all the circles, city circle and everything, they work wonderfully for the youth, for the college going youth. So I was a city team lead in Bhopal. So I understand,
Yes.
like, we used to mobilize volunteers throughout all the different circles. I just wanted to understand, when we look at the cities like Mumbai or Delhi or the biggest bigger chapters of Make a Difference, are we using the same method to recruit, to engage the working professional in volunteering, or there are some different techniques in that?
No, we don't have any different techniques. We're kind of following the same thing. But the question, like, we are actually noticing a lot more working professionals in bigger cities. So MAD actually has a higher percentage of working professionals. Like Bombay has quite a lot of working professionals. The average age is quite high because a lot of people don't leave Bombay or Delhi. They kind of stay in the system itself. Working professional, as I said, working professional has not really been the time when the problem happens, because now we do our calls. Because a lot of our fellows are working professionals, our calls, evening calls, are happening after 9 o'clock. So the weekly calls are all happening after 9 o'clock, and most working professionals are free on the weekends, and only those kind of working professionals end up being part of the organization. And with that, we're having quite a lot of number of people, working professionals in the system, where the moment they get married is when they are not able to. Then we will need a different kind of a management system, which we have not figured out yet.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm happy to see you or hear you.
Awesome. If you have more questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat or unmute yourselves and ask them directly. While we wait to do that, I'm just going to, in the interest of time, I know some of you may have to rush for other engagements. I'm going to also run the end or the final poll that we have for all of you. Yeah.
The application to selection ratio, is that yeah. So this year, what it's been is at around, actually I have the exact number. The sourcing is going on at this point of time. I'm just trying to figure out where is the document through which I'll be able to share that. Around 18% of the people who apply finally end up, we have a funnel, how many people who end up applying, and then how many people get clear telephonic interview, then how many people clear personal interview, and how many people finally get selected. Around 18% finally from the this thing that gets selected. So around 5x is the current selection number that we have. So that's why when we source, we go for a 5x as a number.
There's one more question from Rimple. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, I'll read it. Okay. Okay, people getting personally hurt when rejected. That's a good question. Getting hurt is probably like it has, hurt is an interesting way to put it, right? Because the way we see it, the way we look at it is that at the end of the day, you are not here because you want to volunteer. You're here because you want to make a difference in a child's life. And at the recruitment, you're clearly told why is it that you are not able to make it. These are the gaps that you have. And the best way for a volunteer to make sense of it is to say, okay, fine. So if I really care about making a difference, these are the gaps that I have. Let me go back and work on it, and I can come back next year. And that's and normally, we do have a lot of volunteers who turn up once, twice, thrice for recruitment, and normally by the third time you do get recruited, just by the sheer passion of wanting to do it again and again. So the assumption that I'm going to give my time for free, so hence no matter what I have to offer needs to be taken, is we feel like a slightly flawed assumption to some extent. So that's how we have that's how we make sense of it. So it's not that it's not a judgment on you. It is just that this is our requirement at this point of time, and this is where the gap is. And if you can fill those gaps and come back, we will have, we'd be happy to take you in next time. And yeah, I guess this is all what the service journey is about, right? Like where there is a part where you have to kind of keep your ego aside and work on it. And yeah, so getting rejected sometimes might be probably the best thing that has happened to you. We have a lot of employees in the organization who have come through the entire system, who did not clear the first recruitment in the organization. So I think it's kind of fine. That's how we see it.
Sorry, just a quick reminder. We've had responses from almost 21 people on the final poll. We'll be wrapping up the meeting in about another 5-7 minutes or so. So it'll be nice to hear from everybody. I know some people have been quite quite humble in telling us that there was no scope for improvement. I don't agree. Anything that you have, any minor inputs also will be really helpful to help us plan. There's also an option for you just to make this whole session, and generally what we're trying to do, building an ecosystem and supporting organizations to scale up more of their volunteering efforts. We're planning to create a support group or a volunteer or a WhatsApp group of organizations who wish to apply some of the learnings from this session, other sessions, into the work that you're doing to engage or scale up your volunteer engagement. So there's a question around whether you would like to be a part of such a group or not. It'd been really helpful to hear from you on that as well, so that we can keep in touch and see what we can do to help you build this further. I think there are a couple of questions from Karthi around is there a credit system for attendance in MAD, and is there an opportunity for a volunteer to just do a short-term engagement as a volunteer as opposed to the typical long-term engagement that you have?
No, currently we don't have a short-term engagement. Minimum is a 1-year commitment. The credit system in MAD is very simple. It basically says you start with 3 credits, which is basically if you're a volunteer who's going to a class. You have, if you go to a class, nothing changes. You stay with 3 credits. If you miss a class, you lose 2 credits. If you miss a class with a substitute, you lose 1 credit, and the substitute gets 1 credit. And if your credit hits 1, you will get a check-in call to say, hey, is everything all right? What's going on? What are the challenges you're facing because of which you're not able to volunteer, and understand it, and hopefully that'll get fixed. And that is what the human capital team does. If your credit hits 0, you will get a developmental call where you're basically, again, checked with what is the challenge you're facing, but more importantly, letting you know that you have to build your credits back up to, 1 or a 2 in the next 1 month. And if you're not able to do that, then we will be asking you to go. We'll let you go. And at the end of 1 month, if they have not been able to build their credit back for very genuine reasons, they were, then it's all right. But if they have not been able to build their credits back, then we will let the person go, because each volunteer actually holds a space. And when they are in the system, and they're not even contributing the bare minimum, they are restricting the opportunity of some another volunteer to be able to provide the same support. So that's really the credit system that we have at this point of time in the organization.
I think that's it.
Cool. And is there is that's it? That's it? Sorry.
Just a second. I think there's one more question. Yeah, this one's from Rimple. Her question is around how do you ensure effective monitoring and managing, as all the mentors may not have the same vision or zeal towards what you're doing, and how do you sort of bring all of them together in a collective sense towards that?
Yes, well, the one part of it is that there's definitely, like, we have something called the leadership circle, which is at the end of in the beginning of every year, all the city leaders come together, and we inspire them and mobilize them and things like that. And then every week we have a call with them where we inspire them and mobilize them. We have 0 hours where we inspire them and mobilize them. So there's like a constant inspiration mobilization cycle that's there in the system. That's there, and there is a lot of communications like emails and WhatsApps and all the stuff that's going on to kind of inspire and communicate them. So that's one part of it. While the other part of it is that there is a collective ownership, which is that once they get inspired by the idea, it's not like the community's results are always visible for the mentor. So as a mentor, mentor or volunteer, how your community is doing, and you can see the community is not doing. So the data is very visible to them, and there is a collective ownership for that. And when people genuinely care about something, they would want to do something about it. That's pretty much what we have kind of experienced ourselves. So first, get people to genuinely care about something by connecting them to the child, to the cause really well, by inspiring and mobilizing them and connecting to the larger collective, and then give them visibility so that they're able to then take action real time for it. So those dashboards that gives you complete visibility about how good or bad your community is doing. And many times that prompts action.
I don't know if you have the time for this, but maybe we can keep this as the last question again from Karthi around what's the selection process like for your volunteers?
Currently, so if you register on our website, you will get 5 emails. There's 5 emails you will receive, and you're expected to reply. These are emails with questions. So it's an email-based selection system where you get 5 emails, and based on your responses, the first round of check is done. And more importantly, some prioritization is done about who gets a call first, because from then on, telephonic interviews will happen where an individual volunteer will call and talk to you and understand what is your, make you understand what are the logistical requirements from ad. This is 1 year, these are the 1 year commitment, there's a number of hours that you need to put in, this is where the shelter homes are you ready to do this? And so that becomes really like a logistical telephonic round. Once the telephonic is done, then you turn up for a recruitment workshop where you get an deeper understanding of where we already start connecting you to the child, understands the problem at a deeper level, understand the solution to some extent. And then based on that, you go through a technical round where you're supposed to do whatever you're doing in class, you will kind of prepare for it and you will deliver it yourself. So it's a technical round and an HR round. The HR round is where your values and all those things are being tested. And with that, the selection process is done for that time. Then we actually look at the first 1 year of a volunteer, because we know that there's only so much we can really judge through any of these things. The first year of a volunteer is what we're really checking. It's almost like the probation period, because at the end of the first year, we get a lot of data about the volunteer. How often did they turn up for classes? How participative were they in 0 hours? How participative were they in sourcing, recruitment, CFR, all of those kind of things, and how participative were they in events. So we get a lot of data, and only those people who are really participative and who really believe in this community and is really ready to invest their time in building this community and nurturing it will be the people who will be allowed to continue the next year. So we have a retention process every year, but at the end of the year, not all volunteers are offered the opportunity to continue to the next year. So that also happens, and really that it's at the retention stage that we really, that's also one level of selection that we put in place.
Bob, I think this has been wonderful. Jithin, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining also. I think this has been really interesting to hear so many very diverse questions also and ideas. So we'll end the session here. Unless anybody has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or send them to us on email, and we'll be happy to relay them to Jithin and then get you to respond to them. Thank yous have started pouring in. So I guess a lot of people have been thanking you and have found the session really insightful. Thank you so much, Jithin, for taking out so much time and putting all of this together.
Yeah, no, thanks. I did not imagine. Very happy that so many people stayed back for this long. Really appreciate it. And like, yeah, if there is any support that I can be of use, please let me know. And this is really how we are doing things. It doesn't mean this is the right way. We are learning ourselves massively. Every year is humbling. And every year I'm just realizing how wrong I was the previous year. So just take it with all that caveat also. And there are a lot of really amazing other organizations in India right now doing phenomenal volunteering work like a UNI, Everest, and Bhumi and things like that. So we are really happy to be part of this ecosystem.
One last thing, we'll be sharing a recording of this session with you on email. So in case there are any other colleagues that you'd like to share this with, or even revisit some part of the conversation in case you join in later, you can do that once we send the recording. Super. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.